Usually somebody's home purchase is the largest transaction that they make in their life. Obviously, losing a down payment, losing that cash to close is devastating financially. Not only can be devastating for title companies, but specifically on the home buyer side as well. So that's why we're pretty passionate about trying to solve this payments problem that exists there so that we make sure we're protecting those biggest investments and we're bringing security, transparency, efficiency, all of those wonderful things that you would expect from a modern payment system into the real estate world.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Keys to Real Estate. I'm your host, Mary Schuster. Well, my guest today works every day out on the front lines to help us fight fraud. And let's face it, we need all the help we can get, right? There are $2 trillion in real estate sales annually. That's $2 trillion that flow in and out of settlement accounts. And it's $2 trillion that thieves are working really hard to get their hands on. So it's like having 2 trillion targets on your back. And that doesn't even count the refis. Andy White, founder and CEO of Closinglock, joins us today to talk us through all different types of frauds and how to protect your business and keep your customers' money safe. So there's at least 2 trillion reasons to stay tuned and enjoy this conversation conveying ways you can fight back with industry and consumer advocate, Mr. Andy White. The presenting sponsor for this season of Keys to Real Estate is Closinglock. Working in title, do you ever feel like you've got a target on your back? Every year, $2 trillion moves in and out of escrow accounts in the United States. Fraudsters are watching and waiting for one wrong click, one unsecured email, just one oversight. And then just like that, your client's life savings are gone. That's where Closinglock comes in. Closinglock provides title companies a secure, all-in-one platform to prevent fraud, protect funds, and streamline closings. Over 1 million home sales have closed safely without incident in Closinglock. The fraudsters only have to be right once. Title companies have to be right every time. Closinglock has your back. Visit closinglock.com today to learn more. Andy White, welcome to Keys to Real Estate. We're so glad you're here.
Thank you so much for having me.
Well, I really wanted to get you on the podcast because anytime I talk to agents, especially lately, it's just so tough out there with the state of things, and there's nothing we can do about the interest rates. There's nothing we can do about a lot of things, but it doesn't take very long into the conversation until the subject of fraud comes up, and it's just so hard for them because they feel like sitting ducks. I mean, real estate, such a big target. We move $2 trillion a year of money around. Fraudsters have caught up with us. And so it just feels like it's an ever-moving target, and people, they can get paralysis due to analysis. Like, what do I do? And so you guys are out there on the front lines. You are solutioning. And so I wanted to hear from you what you're seeing out there, how big the fight is, and what people need to be doing and thinking. So I really want to have that conversation. What do you see when you're working with agents?
Yeah, that's a great question. And just real quick intro on myself in case people aren't familiar. I am Andy White, the founder and CEO of Closinglock. And Mary, to your point there, Closinglock is a software platform that we built to protect specifically real estate transactions from these evolving fraud vectors that we see, and also making sure we help secure the actual flow of funds. Yeah. The customers we work with are all the people that are listening to this podcast, title companies, law firms, anybody that's moving money for a real estate transaction. We've been blessed to secure and verify the exchange of data and money for over 1 million home sales now, which is super awesome. I think of it in terms of life savings. That's over 1 million life savings that we've helped protect. So pretty cool from that aspect. You asked about the evolving landscape that we're seeing out there, particularly, I'll talk a little bit about payments as well. But when I think about real estate transactions, I think of them in two components. We move data, a lot of different parties that we're moving data back and forth between, and we move money between those various parties. Money comes in, money goes out. From the data perspective, almost all of that is email, phone, and fax. Right. And all three of those are fairly easy to defraud people with. And then all the money movement is actually checks and wire transfers. And when we actually think of it, I think you mentioned this at the top end here, $2 trillion, your number is spot on there, that goes into an escrow account, and $2 trillion that goes out of an escrow account in the US each year, just on the residential side. So there's a lot of money moving around. All those flows are at risk of becoming victims to fraudsters every year. And one of the fun things I like to talk about when we think about our real estate system and how it works today. I mentioned email, phone, and fax, and then checks and wires. The FedWire system, the first wire that actually went through FedWire, quick history lesson, because I find this fascinating here, was in 1918 using a telegraph. So I don't think most people know the FedWire system's been around for over 100 years, originally with a telegram there through the telegraph. Even the modern quote unquote system that we have today, the real-time gross settlement system, that actually started in 1981. So slightly older than I am, and I'm not exactly a spring chicken anymore. So combine email, phone, and fax, checks and wires, kind of the newest system that we're using for settling real estate transactions is over 40 years old, which is quite incredible. Obviously, the world has evolved a lot during that time. We're a lot more digital now than we've ever been. You can buy anything you want from your phone. We have Amazon here, same day delivery in a lot of cases. It's crazy. You can do that sitting, on your couch in your PJs. You can literally buy coffee and groceries with your watch. I do that all the time with my Apple Watch.
Yeah.
Real estate payments haven't gotten there yet. They should, and they will. And they should be just as convenient and just as secure as those methods I was just describing. But that's something that we're kind of working toward. And, that's when we think about these real estate transactions, talking about money, I mentioned earlier, 1 million life savings that we've protected. Usually somebody's home purchase is the largest transaction that they make in their life. Obviously, losing a down payment, losing that cash to close is devastating financially. Not only can be devastating for title companies, but specifically on the home buyer side as well. So that's why we're pretty passionate about trying to solve this payments problem that exists there so that we make sure we're protecting those biggest investments and we're bringing security, transparency, efficiency, all of those wonderful things that you would expect from a modern payment system into the real estate world.
Yes. Well, you make such a great point there because there has not been a big change technologically with payments. Everything else has, including the black hats. The black hats have gained ground. They're using all the modern tools. And so it just leaves this sense of vulnerability. And I think that's where some of the malaise comes in, is can feel like the black hats are winning. And so having folks working in the white hat area to try to help keep us ahead of the game and protect that $2 trillion that is moved annually is so important. And I remember, Andy, the first time I watched Frank Abagnale Jr. speak.
Yeah.
And he was so honest about the things he had to do, including finding the Gutenberg printing press to fake his checks and all that. And it made for a great movie. But to your point about you do everything from your watch and your phone, and the bad guys do too, right?
And they're not stopping, right? Because that $2 trillion that we talked about that's up for grabs there, it's based on information that we're sharing through those outdated systems, which are very easy to spoof. And so it's not surprising when you put all that together. I've done a lot of VC pitches in our day. We've been fortunate to raise over $50 million for our business to solve these problems. But whenever I talk to investors about it, it's very obvious when you put it on paper. I've got a lot of different parties on a transaction. They all use communication systems that are pretty easy to fool people with. And then we send money through irreversible methods that are basically this kind of black box, right? We're sending a wire transfer. You got an account number. You don't know who it's going to. You hope it's going to the right spot. And you just wire off your money and then let's cross our fingers and hope that I didn't lose my life savings there. It's a little tongue in cheek what I'm describing there, but that's somewhat the reality of what we have in the real estate system.
It is. And so when I'm having these conversations with agents, I kind of get to the next question. I'm like, well, we do have tools, and they bring up a good point. And in fairness, if I'm evaluating a solution, if it solves the one problem that I might experience, that's great. But if it can come in and also solve for some other things that maybe are going to help my bottom line. Let me break it down for you, Andy. What they say is, yeah, I know there are tools out there, but I could go broke buying all of them and then still get hit. So I think a key aspect of a winning solution, it's got to help either with my bottom line somehow. So that you're saying, you touched on that earlier. You said that's in there too. That's a facet.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. Our secure pay system is actually paid for by the home buyer. So they pay directly for it. And often it's a similar price point to what that home buyer would be paying to send a wire transfer through their bank. So from the buyer's perspective, they're paying the same cost. It's obviously much more convenient, more secure, and we can kind of get into the details there. But there's that aspect. So the title company may not have any incremental cost for that. But then
Okay.
to your point on consolidating all in one platform, that's been a big belief of mine as well. Not only from a cost perspective of trying to get everything together, but the operational efficiencies that go along with that, right? Having your title company employees, training them to use 5 different tools is not an ideal situation. And then training your home buyers and home sellers and real estate agents that they need to use 5 different tools as well in order to interact with the title company. Obviously not a good situation and not a good buyer experience as well. So anytime we can put all these things together into one platform and then try to reduce the cost on it, obviously is valuable for everybody in the transaction. I've always talked for a long time. There are 2 things that we want to do in real estate. We want to make it more secure for everybody. So let's eliminate fraud, but let's also make it simpler for everybody as well, right? Because as we remove some of that complexity, as we keep things more simple, that can drive down cost, but it can also drive a much better experience. We're all in the same service industry here. We want referral business. We want repeat business. And how do we get that? We get that by delivering exceptional service to our customers.
You are singing my song I'm so glad that you are creating a better customer experience as well. So money's safer, the operation is getting efficiency, and the customer is having a better experience. Like, that's the trifecta.
Yeah, exactly. And to your point earlier about kind of fraud growing, thinking of a customer here in Texas recently, they told us they catch 2 to 3 fraudulent wires per month. When you run that out for a year, that's millions of dollars a year. Then that's on top of what they've already been doing. And I'm happy to talk in a minute about some of that as well. But the amount of losses in the industry continues to go up, even though we're doing a great job and we prevent a ton of fraud. And I'm proud that our customers aren't as vulnerable to these scams as others are out there. It's not going to stop in our industry. It's continuing to grow and it's continuing to evolve. You were talking about the black hats earlier. There's a lot of money on the line, $2 trillion. They're not just going to walk away from this industry and start going somewhere else. Just because we thwart one of their scams doesn't mean they're just going to stop there and say, okay, well, I guess we're done. We'll just go do something else.
Right.
To your Frank Abagnale comment earlier, they'll figure out some other way to come at us.
Sure. Well, and it's not only wire fraud, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's becoming more widespread. It's becoming more exotic. They're hitting different places. What other kinds of fraud are you guys seeing and helping mount a defense for?
To your point here on these evolving fraud or
Yeah.
evolving threat vectors. Obviously, we've seen payoff fraud. We've seen seller impersonation fraud. One of the things I always talk about when I think about preventing fraud, there are 2 aspects to it from my mind. There's this layered approach that's general cybersecurity stuff, right? It's a complicated landscape out there, and there's not just a silver bullet. Oh, just go sign up with Closinglock and then you're done. I wish that were true and that's all you had to do. And then, we made everybody's lives perfect and then we didn't have to do anything else. But there's a lot of general cybersecurity stuff that applies directly to our industry as well. And particularly, I think about email. How many email accounts out there still don't have 2-factor authentication turned on? Make sure you're locking down your email, making sure you're locking down your passwords, have a password manager, love password managers, and put 2FA on that password manager so nobody can actually get into it. That'll lock down your email and help lock down your passwords elsewhere. These are things we do internally at Closinglock, and these are things that are applicable regardless of what industry we're in. Even in our personal lives, these are things we should be doing. Lock down our bank accounts, right? Can somebody unilaterally wire out or send out a lot of money from your bank account? I sure hope not. At Closinglock, we'd never allow that. Title companies, I doubt, would allow that either. So those are kind of the layered general cybersecurity stuff that I think applies to our industry and every industry out there. But there are also industry specific things that apply. And I've seen this evolve in our industry. I've been in the industry almost a decade now, which is kind of crazy to believe. And over that time, I've really seen the focus. When I first got into it, we talked a little bit about cashier's check fraud, and we focused on outbound wire fraud, making sure the money going out of the escrow account was getting to the right party. And then that shifted a little bit to making sure buyers are getting money into the escrow account in the appropriate way. So solving for the inbound wire fraud problem, and then payoff fraud, like I mentioned, making sure we're actually paying off a legitimate lender there. And then now we hear a lot about seller impersonation fraud over the last couple of years. The cool thing from my perspective, you talked about the black hats and the white hats. I like to think of myself as one of the white hats along the way here. And we've been able to evolve along with this fraud. When I first started the company, Abby and I, when we started it together, we basically said, hey, buyer, here are your wiring instructions. That was it. We were like, stop emailing. Emailing wiring instructions is a terrible idea. As soon as you put your wiring instructions in an email, A fraudster is going to do the exact same thing, and then you're leaving it up to your buyer to decide which of these is the correct set of wiring instructions. So he said, stop doing that, send them through Closinglock instead. And that's all we did. That was it. That was the extent of the problem we were solving. Here are your wiring instructions. And we've evolved from there to, okay, let's also receive wiring instructions. Let's also verify identities. Let's have this secure pay option where people can pay digitally, conveniently, securely. It's insured just the way you'd kind of expect with a modern payment system. We've evolved to checking 50 different data signals that all come together to form a comprehensive view of the individual. Just a quick little tangent here on combining these data signals to perform the comprehensive view of that person. I hear a lot of times people talk about, oh, well, we do things in person a lot. And I think that's great. We work in person all the time. I'm a big proponent of being in person, but that's not necessarily good enough from a fraud perspective. Fraudsters will show up in person as well. And a fraudster will show up with a fake ID. You mentioned Frank that we talked about earlier. He certainly wasn't scared to show up in person and defraud people. And I think there's a certain level of trust when you meet somebody in person. You're like, okay, I see you, Mary, like you're a real person. Therefore, I trust that you are Mary and that you're not going to defraud me. Unfortunately, not everybody operates that way. 99.99 something percent of us do operate that way. There's a small percentage that will show up in person. And one of the things I think that we miss a lot of times, our mindset is, oh, if it's online, it's riskier, right? Like if it's electronic or digital, it might not be as safe as if I do something in person. The reality is, if you show up in person and give me your driver's license, I had a title company in Dallas tell me this several years ago. She said somebody came in with a fake ID and she was really kind of flustered about it. And she was like, hey, what can you do to prevent this? Because she said, they showed up, they had a fake ID. I didn't know if it was fake or not. And I'm looking at it, trying to decide, is this a real ID or not? And they ended up, I think, walking away from the transaction because they just didn't feel comfortable with it. But she was very concerned about that. She was like, I can't believe somebody would actually come into our office with a fake ID. And she said, can you build us something to help prevent this from happening in the future? Which is what became eventually our identity verification system for preventing seller impersonation fraud. But the reality is you can get so many more data signals digitally than you can in person. So if you show up in person, I check your ID, maybe I can tell if it's real or not. I don't know. If you do that online, I can compare the selfie with the picture on the ID. I can check that driver's license with the DMV to make sure all those records are legit. I can make sure you're not using a deceased social security number. I can check the age of your email address, your phone number, where you're logging in from, the type of device you're logging in from, who's on your bank account. There are all sorts of data signals that you can actually put together when you use a digital system that you can't do in person. And then you can really create that comprehensive view of, is this person a fraudster or not?
Oh my gosh, I love that so much because you're right. Fake IDs, they will walk in. And you're right. We used to do things like look for a wedding ring or all these
Yep.
little manual things. But you still, when someone is in front of you, you presume innocence until you just can't deny anymore. We had that problem. We still do a little bit with the adoption rate of virtual closings or even
Oh, yeah.
hybrids. Is that assumption was immediately, well, I don't know if they're online or who they say they are. Things like, well, somebody could be sitting just off screen with a gun to their head, making them do it under duress. I'm like, well, somebody could be out in the car with a gun, making them do it under duress too. That just they walk into your shop doesn't make it any better. And then when they really do start to understand a lot of the signals and data points that you can really correlate, you can be pretty darn sure that you're talking to and working with who you're supposed to be talking to and working with.
Exactly. I mean, I would challenge anybody. I can probably tell electronically through our platform whether somebody's a fraudster a whole lot better than you could tell in person by just looking at their driver's license.
With my spidey sense, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's part of it too. And that gets back to the layered approach that I mentioned earlier. It's not a one size fits all system. It's not just do this and then you're done with all cybersecurity. Your spidey senses, to your point there, actually play an important part in telling if somebody's a fraudster or not. We see all the time customers will tell us, I bet 9 times out of 10, I don't have the exact stats, but I bet this is right. 9 times out of 10, a fraudster walks away when they get challenged to do an identity verification. So, 1 out of 10, they'll try to actually defraud the identity verification system. But more often than not, they'll actually walk away when they are told, hey, you've got to go through this identity verification. Then they say, oh, I don't want to do this transaction. You're too difficult. I've heard that one before. The fraudsters try to blame the title company. You're making this too complicated. I'll just find another title company to do it. And maybe they will, maybe they won't. I would probably guess they won't. But yeah, the reality is they will walk away when they start seeing those hurdles in front of them there.
Also, not just, and I love the better customer experience. Like I said, that's just makes me crazy happy. But also you have to look at it kind of defensively in this. Anytime I was undertaking an activity as a closer, I just thought in the back of my mind, if I had to ever defend myself, why I made the choice I did, why I did not follow procedure on this, I wanted to be able to tell a judge I did everything I could.
Yeah.
We're getting now to where when these products and services are out there, if you do not employ them, it's similar to, well, Your Honor, I didn't lock up my check stock, but it should be okay that I didn't because I was a victim of fraud. Well, no, your mitigation steps count, right?
Yep. Exactly. No, you're exactly right. And unfortunately, there are some court cases out there where the title company, or I've seen real estate agent as well, were actually held liable by the courts for somebody losing money, even though they don't think they did anything wrong. But there's a certain level of fiduciary responsibility. There's even, it's just the ethical thing to do. Like, we should be trying to protect people's money.
Are you having a storm there? Did we lose your lights, Andy?
Yeah, we did. My lights went out, but I'm on battery power here, so no problem at all. We'll keep rolling.
You just never know what can happen.
Exactly. You got to prepare for everything.
Right. Well, we're talking then about getting out of merely reactive, and getting more into proactive. I'd love for you to talk about some action steps that people can take to kind of do all of these things, to just make the whole ecosystem healthier from their standpoints. Let's walk through some of those if we could.
Yeah, there are a lot of different things that we've talked about already, and different systems and different types of fraud. It's always important to understand what type of fraud you're trying to prevent, right? And I say, if you're trying to prevent, somebody from spoofing emails, then get communications out of emails. If you're trying to prevent sending your funds to the wrong spot in a payoff statement, then use a payoff verification system that exists. We offer one. There are other vendors out there that offer them. So it depends on the type of fraud that you're kind of looking to solve there. When I think about it, from maybe a payments perspective, trying to reduce the amount of fraud risk that exists in payments. And when I think of payments, often I think of kind of money coming into the escrow account. I mentioned earlier, secure your communications. That's both internally and externally. So making sure everything you're doing internally is locked down from a communicative standpoint, because one of the worst things that can happen is, you get an email from your boss and it says, hey, I need you to wire off this money. And you assume that's legit. If somebody's hacked into the email accounts there, then that could cause a lot of problems. So make sure you've locked things down internally, and password managers, two-factor authentication. Yeah, it adds a little bit of friction to your process, but it's worth it in the long run. But also making sure we lock things down and secure our communications externally. I mentioned earlier, all of the data moved around as email, phone, and fax. Make sure if we're using email, phone, and fax that we try not to use them for sensitive information, particularly wiring instructions, emailing around. That one's it's become a pet peeve of mine. There's no good reason to ever be emailing wiring instructions. It's so easy for a fraudster to spoof that, duplicate it. We had a case the other day. We had somebody, a home buyer, actually sent $143,000 through our secure pay system, which was fantastic. She used us to pay for her home. She called us crying because she had gotten a spoofed email from the law firm that said, hey, the wiring instructions you got, those were wrong. Here are the actual ones. Call us to verify them, and we'll make sure we get your money. And she said, well, that's weird. I didn't get wiring instructions via email, and I actually just paid through Closinglock. And then she called us to say, hey, it was a fraudster trying to dupe her out of her $143,000 there. And she was in tears of joy because she was so thankful that we had that service for her, and we were able to make sure her money was kind of going to the right spot there. So there's the email stuff that I just talked about. There's multi-factor authentication. As much as I don't like email, but if you have to use email, layer on the multi-factor authentication with it. Check the phone number as well. Emailing, traditionally, our industry has said, hey, buyer, here's your emailed wiring instructions, and make sure you call us to confirm them. Don't call the fraudsters. Call us. Look up the phone number online. Make sure you got a verified phone number. And that's been our approach largely. And in that case, you're relying on the buyer to make the best decision. And I've got bad news. The fraudsters are incredibly clever on what they send out. In fact, there was a Harvard study recently last year that showed AI generated phishing emails or spoofed emails were a 3x higher response rate or click through rate than the human generated ones. So pretty tough for a home buyer to decipher between this spoofed email and this legitimate email that I got. And then which number am I supposed to call? If I'm a buyer, how am I supposed to know, like, oh, I need to go Google your title company and then find your phone number and then call that one? And even if I do that, the fraudster may have actually redirected the phone number and I might be talking to them anyways. It's a pretty tough system to end up with. Just hoping people get the right information and hoping that they call the right party to actually confirm this. And unfortunately, that's been kind of best standard for what we've had for a long time. On top of all that, so lockdown email, robust multi-factor authentication, and then some type of insurance on top of it as well. There are platforms out there, ours included. Make sure you have some type of automatic built-in per transaction insurance offering. If the buyer goes to the bank and they wire off their money to a fraudster, there's not insurance that covers against that. They lose their money in that case. If you can give them a digital payment system, digital payment solution like Closinglock Secure Pay, that is insured. And that's one of those things I believe, and I'm not just trying to plug our payment system. I believe long-term for the industry, these modern, newer payment systems for moving money on the transaction are really the future. These aren't going to be nice to haves like they have been. They will be requirements of things to have. Just like cybersecurity from a title company's perspective, that was a nice to have 10 years ago. And then 5 years ago, it was kind of a more need to have. And then now you can't operate a business without having all those cybersecurity procedures and policies in place. I think the exact same thing will happen with moving money for transactions. I think long gone are the days of telling somebody, go to the bank, wire off your money, use this black box wiring system that's super antiquated, type in the account number, cross your fingers, hope it goes to the right spot. Call us repeatedly to see if we've actually gotten the money because there's no other transparency in that transaction versus, hey, why don't you just link your bank account and pay online like you do with literally everything else that you buy? So making sure that we've got money going from the home buyer into the account in a secure way, but also money leaving the title company. Make sure it's all covered and insured in some type of manner there. And then a couple of other quick points I wanted to hit on here.
Yeah.
Not all digital payment solutions are made equal. They're good funds regulations in every state. Make sure whatever you're choosing and using, because the auditors will certainly check this at your annual audit if you don't check it. Make sure that the money that you've got coming in is good funds compliant. Some of the new payment systems that we have out now, like FedNow, RTP, those are actually starting to enter into the consumer world. People might want to send you an RTP credit. It's very cool. I think they should count as good funds in every state. Unfortunately, state statutes don't all agree with my thinking there. So until
not yet, anyway. Yeah.
Exactly. Until that gets caught up, just make sure you know how you're receiving money from those payment systems that are out there. As we think about the buyer's experience, because I'm big on what's the experience like. And part of that is when I started my company, it was based on the fact that we had bought our house a year prior. And I heard about an email spoofing scam where a home buyer almost lost all their money. And I realized, man, that could have been me. I didn't do anything special. I just drove to Wells Fargo and wired off our money. I could have easily lost our life savings. And that's what got me thinking about, okay, somebody's got to come up with a better way to do this. And the advantage of these new digital payment systems that exist out there is that they can not only add convenience, but they can add transparency and they can add operational efficiency as well, in addition to removing all the fraud risk, like I already talked about. When we think about it from a convenience perspective, like I said, when I bought my home, I remember looking back thinking, why couldn't I just link my bank account? Like, you guys go figure it out. Why do I have to go to the bank? Why do I have to get a cashier's check? Why do I have to try and send a wire transfer? And also, I bought my home. It was our first home, mid-30s, average age for buying a home, new home buyer there, probably average transaction size, very average home here in Austin. And I did all of that. And they said, okay, well, we're going to need a wire transfer. And I was like, I don't know what a wire transfer, like, this is not what I do on a daily basis. At the time, I was like, I don't know what this is. So then I had to figure out what that was. I went online, I had to get the information from the title company and then type that all in online. And then I found out that I was sending more than the transaction limit that Wells Fargo would allow. So I actually had to go into the bank to wire off the funds. The whole process there was just pretty abysmal. That
Abysmal,
still
and it
exists.
sounds a little bit like 1972.
Exactly. Yeah. Like when this wire transfer system started. And that's still largely the standard for what we do for expecting to get money from home buyers. We're like, hey, here are your wiring instructions. You guys figure out how to get it to us. So I love the idea of giving people an option to do it
Yeah.
directly from their phone, directly from their computer, online while they're sitting on the couch. Just make it a lot more convenience. And that's what these digital payment systems provide. And we do internal testing on this of surveys of how people feel about it. We actually see over half of people that have the option to pay digitally online with us do. So over half of buyers opt into paying for this. And out of those that use it, the response rate in terms of customer satisfaction is through the roof. I think it's 4.7 or 4.8 stars out of 5, which is incredibly high. I mean, any kind of system, you always have some detractors there. But regardless, that's an incredibly high buyer satisfaction score. So improving that experience for the buyer is obviously insanely valuable to the title company, because that's how you make the real estate agent like you, which means that's how you get more business in the future. And the other two things I want to say, these digital payments and modernizing the way we're sending and receiving money, is that they provide transparency and in some cases speed, much more so than what we typically have with a wire or a check. You think about wires and checks. You send them off. A check, for instance, you hope it gets deposited. You hope it doesn't get lost in the mail. You hope it actually goes to the person that you're intending to send it to. Wires, similarly, you hope it's going to the person you intend to send it. It's an account number. You type it in, you click send, and then, what happens? It's this very black box experience that you have. Whereas a lot of these digital payment systems, real-time payment systems that exist now, when you go to send your life savings off, you can actually know where it's going, who it's going to, and feel assured and secure that the money is actually going to the right place. And it happens very quickly too. I've heard countless stories of people having to send money from the branch. The bank said, no, you can't do it online. It's too much, or we just don't allow people to send online wires. And so you have to come into the branch. There's several that I know of where the person ended up having to drive hours to get to their bank branch and then come back to the closing table to make that transaction happen. The most egregious case I know of was in Florida, somebody buying a second home who lived in New York. They were in Florida trying to close on the home with a Florida title company. They had to fly back to New York, buy a plane ticket, get back to New York so they could send the wire from their bank branch and then fly back to Florida so they could close on that transaction. And when the customer told us that obviously they were looking for a digital payment solution, because they're like, oh, we have got to have something better to offer our customer than telling them they need to fly back to Florida. So that kind of speed there can be enhanced in addition to the transparency. And then the last thing I wanted to say on this was the operational efficiencies that you can get from digital payments. I mean, we've all known for years checks are not a very efficient manner of moving money. And in fact, that's why all these companies now take credit cards. They're happy to pay the 3% processing fee, because that's less of a fee than they would have had to pay in terms of operational efficiency if they were actually dealing with checks or cash in that case. So the operational efficiencies that you can leverage with digital payments can be extremely high, not only just replacing checks and the traditional stuff we're talking about there, but you get a wire transfer into your account. How do you know who it belongs to? Do you know where that money came from? Do you know which file it should be matched to? How do you reconcile that? A check gets lost. How do you reconcile that? All this time that we're asking our teams, our title company teams, escrow teams, to spend chasing these funds, answering calls, updating where we are in this in terms of where the money is going. All of that can be largely automated to reduce the amount of effort we're spending on that. So we can actually spend time doing things that we want to do, like making sure we deliver a great customer experience for our customers, or making sure we're engaging with our real estate agents so they'll bring
Generating new revenue. Yeah.
exactly the good things that we should be doing as a title company.
Well, yeah, I hear you. And several of those things that you mentioned, and also the organized groups that go to work at a post office to steal checks from the post office, that's clearly a thing. The
Yep.
flying from the Florida and New York deal, the wiring system that doesn't even do, with just a couple of notable exceptions, a payee match. Like,
Yep.
that is so easy, and it's not even in there. So you kind of put all those things together, and you go, and I just want to shout at everybody. We tolerated all this for a long time because it wasn't very broken.
Yep.
It worked as long as it
It
worked. If
wasn't
it
a thing.
wasn't broken, and
Yeah.
yeah, you could put some bows around it and maybe put a seat belt on it, but it felt like a little overdoing. And then you hear all of this today, and I just want to scream from the mountaintop, guys, the system is broken. Folks like you that come to help solve that, to help fix it, I'm just really appreciative of. But I also wanted to double click on one thing that we went by a
Sure.
little bit quickly, because I think it's critical. The insurance that you guys have with your transactions, I'd like for you to explain that a little bit if you could, because agents are starting to find out that their E&O coverage doesn't address it or isn't at the level they thought it was, or the really smart people audit their insurance contracts every year or every renewal with their E&O. But a lot of people don't find out until they've been hit, and then they find out they don't have any coverage. So would you expand on that for me? Because that one's compelling to me.
Yeah, absolutely. You're exactly right on insurance. The devil's always in the details of what it does and doesn't cover, right? And we've spent a lot of time and money making sure we could get the most robust offering possible that basically says, hey, look, if you send money through us, it's going to be insured up to $2.5 million. Or if you send money to somebody using the information you got through us, it's going to be covered. And that takes a lot of work. And there are other vendors out there that offer insurance as well. So I won't pretend we're the only ones there. But I do think it's important that people understand the nuances there of those insurance policies. What are they actually covering? Are you covered from X, Y, and Z? If your home buyer sends money to the wrong spot, your insurance is probably never going to pay for that, but is there a way that they could pay through a digital payment system that would be insured for them, so you can give them that option if they want? Or if you're going to be wiring off a payoff, have you actually verified that wiring information? So if it does go to a fraudster, there's an insurance policy that kicks in to cover that. And like I said, we spent a lot of time and money. That was not an easy thing to do, but it was something that we felt the industry really needed. When we started in this industry, E&O covered wire fraud losses. And so if a title company lost money, I mean, it's a big deal. Nobody wants to lose money, but there was insurance that actually would cover that loss. And we saw over time, those limits came down, right? At one point, you could get $1 million of coverage or at least 500K. And then it was, well, we'll give you 2K of coverage. And then it was, yeah, we'll give you 50K of coverage. And then it was, we're not giving you any coverage whatsoever for wire fraud losses. And as we saw that happening in the market, we said, okay, well, we've got to make sure what we're doing is insured to make up that gap so people sleep better at night. Now, obviously, the goal is that there are never any losses. And I'm proud to say that we don't have losses. So that's not something we really need to worry about. But it is important to have that peace of mind and make sure you're protecting both the money that you've got in the escrow account and that you're going to be sending out, but also the money that's coming into that escrow.
Well, Andy, I've been in this industry a couple of days and I'm very passionate about it. And I'm also very protective of our agents because, again, you can go broke trying to make the perfect transaction and just bake all your profitability out of it. And one of the things that has always been so compelling to me about what you guys offer is usually when you're looking at a service or a provider, you're either looking at the revenue side of the balance sheet. Is this going to be a revenue enhancer or is it going to be an expense reducer? And those are fair questions, and everything doesn't have to do everything, but it leaves you typically in one side or the other. When you find a service and a solution that actually impacts both of those things in the direction you want it to go in, oh, now I'm leaning forward and I'm listening. Okay, now I'm pretty sure there's going to be some value there. Honestly, if I were an agent today, what I would do, certainly after listening to this conversation, is I would make a list of all the things that worry me with regard to protection, fraud, moving money, whether it's a scenario you've experienced or you've heard about or you just wonder about. I would write that down and I would give a provider a call and say, all right, here's my list of concerns. Let's walk through it. And then
And how do we delight our customers as well, right? Like I don't want to lose focus on that. Like we want to make sure buyers have a good experience. And I think it's a terrible experience to tell a buyer, hey, if it's under 10K, send us a cashier's check. If it's over 10K, send us a wire. You go figure it out. And by the way, if you send your money to a fraudster, it's on you and you're going to lose your whole life savings. If you read all the email warnings at the bottom of everybody's email signature, we're not responsible for money that you lose. And while that's legally and technically true, can't we provide something better? I mean, why is that the world that we have to live in? There are future payments or there are existing payment systems, digital payment systems that can solve these problems. So I get frustrated, you can probably tell by my tone. I get excited about this because there is a solution. There are things that exist now that can make that better experience for your home buyer. And then to your point, that ends up on the revenue side. Sure, it might be an expense, but often the expense is on the closing disclosure or the buyer pays for it directly. So it's not even hitting the P&L of the actual agent. But then can we also get on the revenue side of, we're saving, I think, operational efficiencies. We estimated about 2 hours per transaction for digital payments that go through us versus traditional ways. So can we save on the expense side? And then can we get repeat business, which starts hitting on that revenue side of the world? Because every time you delight your buyer, they will tell their real estate agent, and that real estate agent will stay with you for life. I'm not saying anything new here. This is the tried and true method of how our industry has worked for decades now. And the more people become to expect digital transformation. But I was thinking about this before this call, even Mary, on if you wanted somebody to sign something, if you're a title company and you've got a form that you needed them to sign. A long time ago, maybe you would email it to them, ask them to print it out, fill it in, scan it back in, send it back to you, maybe just come in person and do it or something like that. And then the world said, that's ridiculous. Why can't we just DocuSign this stuff? And that's what people do now, right? Like I would never send you a document expecting you to print it out, sign it, scan it back in and send it to me. That's a huge pain in the butt. I'd send you a DocuSign. Same thing with payments. Like we haven't evolved yet. We haven't transformed yet. But traditionally we're just like, yeah, here are the wiring instructions. Yeah, go figure it out. And, call me to verify them because you don't want to lose your money here. When there are options out there of like, hey, let me help you get your money into our escrow account so you don't have to worry about this.
It is music to my ears. And one of the things that agents also fuss about is, well, the title insurance policy is a commodity. It's a great commodity. It's a valuable commodity, but it's a commodity. My differentiator is my service. I think it's important that they stop and realize those type of experiences that you're talking about are all part of it. It's not just how are they treated when they're in your office. That all goes to it.
It's a holistic thing.
Yeah. And that closing that gap between your customer expectations and your service is step one. And then step two here, that sounds like an actual advantage in the marketplace.
That's what the future of this industry will be. In fact, I've had many personal friends that after they found out what we did, they said, oh man, I just bought a home and they told me I had to go to the bank. They sent me the wiring instructions. I had to call them. It was a huge pain in the butt. And I was like, yeah, they don't use us or anything else out there. And they were like, man, that's so disappointing. And eventually we'll see more and more of that. The expectations of the consumer are not going away. The expectations of the buyer. It's not like buyers are like, oh yeah, I love going to the bank. People don't go to the bank as often as they used to. Often they don't even have a branch to go visit. Dealing with wiring instructions, these kind of outdated concepts are going to go away. I think the future of this industry is actually pretty interesting, especially from a payments perspective. When you really think about a real estate transaction, moving all that data around, moving all that money around, why can't we just link bank accounts and then just have all the money moved to the appropriate parties the way it should? There's no technical reason we can't really do that. I think that's where the world will end up, especially as we talked earlier about RTP, FedNow, new payment rails and technologies that we can take advantage of. So I'm excited and I'm optimistic about where we're going with this. But as you can tell from my excitement a little bit, I'm sometimes frustrated that we still do things the old school ways in a lot of cases.
Yeah, fair enough. Well, you have gotten me excited and optimistic too. Like I said, it can be hard out there because everybody just feels like they have a target on their back, and they do.
And they do.
They do. And real solutions are a game changer. They truly are. And you are down there in Austin. Looks like the lights are still out. You're having a storm, but I'm going to send you the biggest, whitest cowboy hat for the white hat of Austin. It really makes a difference in just helping people get some of that risk baked out. You can save an agency. How many family savings have you saved? Life savings?
Million life savings so far. So, and counting.
Solid work. Thank you so much for these solutions. I hope people bring you their list of problems and see if you can solve them.
I love that. Thanks so much for having me, Mary. You do a great job with everything you do. We're big fans of you. So thank you.
Thank you so much. Well, Andy, you've made me feel a little more optimistic. And thanks so much for helping us fight the good fight. Hey, you'll have to let me know if you prefer a Stetson or a Resistol or what. But no, seriously, thank you so much for being one of the white hats, looking out for our interests. Now, everyone, Andy's contact information is included in today's show notes. Bring them your fraud challenges and nightmares. You might just end up with a powerful suite of solutions to help you punch back and fight harder. So until next time, keep fighting those black hats that are trying to take you down. And at October Research, we'll keep bringing you the knowledge to secure your competitive advantage.